Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
Let's go to George in Essex. George, you're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Matt.
Good morning.
Good morning. We keep talking about, well, obviously we're talking about trade, and we're talking about trade with the European Union, but I think from our perspective, from Britain's perspective, we're poles apart, because as we keep saying, Britain believes very strongly, has done for centuries, on free trade, but the European Union is very much a protectionist organisation with its tariffs and whatever, and we also keep talking about industry, but then you have to look at agriculture when you think 40% of all the money that goes into the European kitty is spent in agriculture. And then the biggest beneficiary of that is the French farmer. They get about 18% of that money back. And what's a big surprise, the next biggest beneficiary is Germany. And is any wonder when Cameron went to talk initially about reform that they've no intention of ever reforming it, because they benefit too much.
But it's interesting, we just spoke to the head of trade policy at the British Chamber of Commerce, and she said there is no such thing as purely free trade. And actually, it kind of rings true, because when I spoke the other day to Barack Obama's former chief trade representative, who was on a visit to London, and he said, make absolutely have no doubts about the fact that when America comes to negotiating a trade relationship, a new trade deal with Britain after Brexit, it will be America first. And that would have been the case under my previous boss, Barack Obama, as it will be the case under Donald Trump. So it's about American interest first, and then it's down to who's got the stronger cards. And in a match-up between America and the UK, I would probably put my money on the United States, frankly. So the price of a free trade agreement with America will definitely be there, but it might come in different forms. It might be individual tariffs. It might be them, forcing us to buy X number of, chlorinated chickens. I mean, who knows what it'll be? But it'll be their opportunity to foist goods on us that we don't necessarily want, or costs of goods.
I think I get that, yes, because and does that come back to bullying? You were talking earlier about Barnier and whatever. Yeah, there's a risk that America could do that to us. Being the bigger partner.
Or China, or India, or Japan.
Yeah, but I go back to what I do, and you might do the same. You buy green beans, for example, in the supermarket, and if you look at the packet, often come from somewhere like Kenya, a third world country. So that poor Kenyan farmer sells his green beans, have to come into the European Union. He slaps tariffs on it, which we then as taxpayers have to pay for. And to subsidise the French farmer, compensate the French farmer, and then at the same time we then give that Kenyan farmer foreign aid. I mean, you can't make that up.
Yeah.
That sort of goes on. And coffee is another, the coffee trade, you think a lot of our coffee comes from Kenya. They're not allowed to sell pre-packed coffee and all that. No, they sell it at a price into the European Union. Again, the biggest beneficiary of all this coffee trade is Germany.
Yeah.
It repacks it all, and the Germans make £3-4 billion on coffee, way in excess of what the Kenyan actual producer makes. I mean, this is what we're.
I'm sure. Listen, I don't know that. I'm not very well versed in those details of that trade relationship with when it comes to coffee in Kenya. But I hear what you're saying, and I think you're probably right that there are many aspects of international trade that are not beneficial, especially to the people making the stuff in developing countries like Kenya.
These are third world countries that we're supposed to be helping, but we're actually preventing them from developing in that context.
But I get back to the main question: is I wonder, what is? I think the question of free trade deals with different countries is so complex, and it's so dependent on the individual countries that we are dealing with. And I do think that there will probably be very few free lunches in this to be had. I wonder whether we're in the best position to negotiate the best deals for us, or whether we actually, at the end of the day, having gone through this whole process, will realise that actually it would have been better just to stay in the EU. And yes, okay, we are hampered by certain regulations within the European Union, but we are negotiating with a strong body that has to be taken seriously by America or China or India. We are much less likely to be taken seriously if we're on our own.
Well, again, what you're alluding to a little bit there is that the EU is playing its cards as acting as a bully. And in terms of trade, is that what we all...
But we'll be bullied by the Americans as well, or by the Chinese.
Is bullying the next trading bloc, and to get its own way and to get a benefit. And that's exactly what I believe the European Union, because you were talking about that earlier this morning, that the EU, I think Barnier, and particularly that chap, I mean, I must say I can't stand the man, Verhofstadt. You talk about empire building, that's what they are talking about, politically building an empire. I thought we'd gone beyond that these days. Empire building, but that's really where the road they're going down with the EU. And I believe that they've been bullying us all along, and they have had no intention of ever negotiating. You're quite right. You said that earlier today about, they've set the cards, and I said, yeah, that was it. There is no negotiation.
Okay.
And
George,
I do believe that we have to take a stand on that, or a stand.
All right. George, thank you very much. Let's go to Betty in Lewis in East Sussex. Beautiful Lewis. Good morning, Betty.
Oh, good morning, Matt.
Good morning.
It's all about economics, I hear. So I'd like to know, will world trade cost us $10 billion per year? And will there be a world court to tell us what to do? And we keep hearing that we're in a market of 360 million people, half of whom appear to be in poverty. Otherwise, why would they come here to work below the minimum wage?
Well, gosh, lots of issues there. I guess the European Union, which is about, without us, is about 450 million people, roughly. Well, if you look at the numbers that have come out, they're doing relatively well. So some of the economies that were in a pretty bad shape a few years ago, like Spain and Italy, are actually doing quite well. They're growing quite robustly. And they seem to have come out of the doldrums. Ireland is another example. Greece is still in a bit of trouble, but even there, the economic pulse has returned. And so that, they're doing quite well. We used to be ahead of that pack, and now we're actually, in terms of growth figures, slightly behind that pack. And then if you look at the numbers of people coming over, well, they've gone down already quite substantially. And that's partly because people think they're no longer welcome, but also because actually, you can make quite a lot of money in Poland at the moment. The Polish economy is growing very healthily, and hang on a minute, and but your pound is worth 10% less to the zloty to what it was before the Brexit vote. So actually, quite a few Polish labourers, I'm told, are thinking, well, why should I go and live in a country where I might not be particularly welcome? I'll stay back in Poland. I can make good money here. My pound is not worth as much as it was before, and so actually, the unintentional consequence of the initial Brexit vote has been that immigration from the rest of the EU has gone down quite substantially, which of course was one of the big issues of the referendum in the first place.
Yes, but it's still happening, isn't it? And you wonder why people will want to come here if Brexit is so terrible.
Well,
and why they're signing up to be British citizens, or trying to.
Well, a lot of people are signing up to be British citizens because they've lived here for a very long time, and this is where their life is. Just as there are lots of Brits, so there's something like 1 million plus Brits living in the EU, mostly in countries like Spain and France. They don't want to come back to Britain. They want to stay in France and Spain, and who could blame them, frankly?
Yes, totally agree. But will we have to pay $10 billion in world trade?
Well, I don't know what the numbers are. I mean, we pay money into the EU, we get a rebate, and actually we've been able to do, trade pretty well around the world as members of the European Union. The open question to which no one really knows the answer is if at the end of all this we will make more money by trading better or more freely with the rest of the world. And we simply don't know the answer to that because we don't know what kind of trade relationship we will get with the Americans or the Chinese or the Indians or the Vietnamese or whoever, what kind of tariffs they will impose on us, what they will force us to swallow that we don't necessarily want to swallow. We just don't know the answer, and that's why so many businesses, Betty, are in such a dither because they haven't got any clarity. And if you want to plan for the future, you need to have some idea of what the future will actually look like.
But will there be a world court to tell us what to do?
Well, there is that as well. Okay, Betty, thank you very much indeed.
It is. It was. It may always be Brexit that leads this programme. So let's take our first call on that. Paul Gilbert is calling us from Taunton. Good afternoon, Paul.
Good afternoon.
So, look, yes, I mean, it's on a cycle, isn't it? And now we're talking about borders, hard borders, soft borders. What do you make of what Michel Barnier has said, which is, look, the truth is it's going to be a hard border. The truth is that's the hard truth and you've got to face it.
Right, it's been made very clear and agreed by both sides that we will not have a hard border. Michel Barnier is deliberately attempting to make these negotiations more difficult to show the EU members that he's a tough negotiator. Well, Mr Barnier, it will not work. We have a long-standing arrangement with Ireland and we will retain an open border. It's in the interests of all EU members and the UK to have tariff-free agreements. To do so would be damaging to all EU countries. Britain is leaving the EU. There'll be no second referendum. The EU should accept those facts and make it easier for all. Britain will be successful in securing free trade agreements both inside and outside of the EU, and EU members know this. The scaremongering and the threats by Mr Barnier will only lead to a decline for the EU.
Okay, well, let's...
Can I just say one thing?
No, I'm not getting rid of you. You've said a few things, and you can say the other thing as well, but I want to bring Sean O'Flynn in on this. He's calling us from Bantry in Ireland. Hello, Sean.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Sean, meet Paul. Paul, meet Sean. So Paul is saying, look, this is just a load of rabble-rousing, scaremongering, trying to frighten us into a position before the end of a negotiation. You're in Ireland. What does it feel like for you?
From my perspective, like, the comments I'd make now would be that of a concerned friend. And if I could take sort of an example that nearly everybody encounters in their personal lives, we all know somebody who's drinking too much.
Sean, sorry, I'm so sorry. It does sound as if you've been trapped in a bucket. Do you mind if I come back to you? We're going to call you back because I've got a feeling that it's going to be an interesting call. But yes, either you sound like a Dalek or somewhere, as I say, in metal. Paul, you wanted to say the one more thing. Say the one more thing and we'll try and get Sean back up.
OK, well, Britain wishes to maintain a good relationship with the EU and, like Churchill, will not be browbeaten. Go and see the film Darkest Hour, Mr Barnier, and you will see that the Brits are quite resolute.
OK, you mentioned Churchill.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know an awful lot about Churchill, but I do know that I think it was 1946. He made a very famous speech calling for a United States of Europe. Do you know that speech?
Yes, I realise that.
So,
but, what it showed in the film is that the government most of them were in favour of going to Hitler and coming to some agreement. And it was only when Churchill went out to the people and asked them that they stood up and said, no, we are resolute.
But just, I mean, you brought up Churchill, not me, but he also said, you know, having been experienced the cost of war, he said that it was very important to have a recreation of the European family.
Yes, but when that happened, we weren't going to go into a United States of Europe as such. We were still going to retain our sovereignty.
Yeah, but he called... I mean, those are the words that he used, creation of United States of Europe. As I say, there may be Churchill experts out there who can tell me context about that, but the words he did use were United States of Europe. George Steele, so patient. George, thank you very much for waiting. Tell me what you've heard so far on the programme and from the politicians this week.
Well, what I've heard so far, I'm in general agreement with, but the point I wanted to make is Mr Barnier seems to be making it up as he goes along. He doesn't understand his own rules. For example, the borders of the EC are either sea borders or land borders. Where there's a land border, like Hungary, as was mentioned by an earlier speaker, it's a hard border. Now, that hard border is erected by the member of the EC adjacent to that, not the countries outside that. Now, if we're leaving the EC, then the Northern Ireland border is nothing to do with us. It's the Republic of Ireland who would be erecting a hard border if they wanted to.
Right.
And it's them that should be leaned on by Barnier, not moaning at us, because it's nothing to do with us.
OK, George, OK.
We're outside.
OK, got it. Thank you very much indeed.
Fixed rooms for heroin addicts to inject themselves are being considered in a third UK area, that's the West Midlands, under plans intended to steer drug users away from the courts. Is drugs decriminalisation the way forward? 0345 60 60973. I've said it is the way forward, but it comes down to what you think. Now, Michael wants to speak to us from Taunton in Somerset to disagree, I think, Michael.
I imagine, yeah, I do disagree. You know, there's a way that seems right to some that leads to death. And at the end of the day, this is substance abuse. There's a reason why it's a criminal act. It's to protect us from not to destroy our lives. The evidence is there. if we basically then, the government become drug pushers, and it enables people to safely commit a criminal act.
Yeah.
You've got the similar...
Well, it wouldn't be criminal anymore if the law changed, would it?
No, it wouldn't. So what does that say about a nation, morally, that okay substance abuse, along the lines of like we do now already with alcohol, as in people drunk and disorderly, which you once were arrested for, and rightly so on the streets, we now have transit vans, basically, made it out like padded cells where people can safely sober up. What does that say for our society? It's not looked upon as morally wrong for substance abuse anymore.
So would you criminalise alcohol as well?
Well, I'd bang in the law real hard again. You want to start abusing police officers, you want to be drunk and disorderly on the street, we'll bang you in a cell and you'll be in before the...
No, that's not what I asked you, Michael. Would you criminalise alcohol?
Drunk and disorderly conduct.
No, that's not what I asked you, Michael. What about alcohol, which is a drug? Why should that be legal?
Because drinking in moderation, so, doctors and those in the know say it's good for us to drink in moderation, not to be drunk and disorderly. That's the difference.
So you wouldn't ban alcohol even though it's a drug that can actually kill you, because in moderation, which implies a bit of self-control, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, there is a difference between, for many of us and most of us, with drinking alcohol and not getting addicted, compared to shooting up with heroin or crack cocaine. If I do that, I'm an addict. I can drink.
Yeah, but what makes you think that by decriminalising it, more people are going to become addicted, when the statistics where it's happened show us the opposite, that less people became addicted to it once it was decriminalised? Just because I no longer go to jail for shooting up crack cocaine. Imagine this, Michael. The government tomorrow changes the law and says that crack cocaine, you're not going to go to jail anymore if you shoot up crack cocaine. You're going to go to hospital instead. Why on earth would that make me suddenly wake up tomorrow and say, I know, I'm going to inject myself with crack cocaine? If I've never injected myself with it before, and I'm now 40, why would I suddenly inject myself with it tomorrow just because I'm not going to go to jail from injecting it and instead go to a hospital?
Well, I put it down to this, Maajid, because the law instilled properly in a nation protects us. So that's the reason...
You don't answer my question, Michael.
Give it to me again, then.
You said that if we were to decriminalise crack cocaine and heroin, people would start injecting themselves. And I'm asking you, why would you, when actually where it's happened, like in Portugal, less addicts became the norm as opposed to more addicts? Addiction dropped where it was decriminalised, not increased. Why would I suddenly wake up tomorrow and decide to inject myself with crack cocaine just because the punishment is no longer jail?
Well, if the evidence points that way, that you get less people addicted to drugs, that still doesn't, in my mind, make it right to legalise. It's still a harmful thing.
All right, so you tell me this, Michael. If less people are addicted to it, if crime falls, if HIV and AIDS drops, and, drugs, gangs and organised crime are taken out of the equation, what is the reason not to do it?
Drugs, gang, and organised crime don't get taken out of the equation. The same as in with illegal cigarettes being brought into Dodge. You still have an illegal alcohol being. No,
Michael, come on. Come on. You and I both know that that's not to the scale as the prohibition with Al Capone and the gangsters that were peddling alcohol when it was attempted to be banned. The fact that you still get illegal alcohol is to avoid the tax on it. It's not to peddle what is fundamentally a contraband product. That's when you get the real serious gangs. So again, I'll ask you the question, right? If you're pulling the rug from under the criminal gangs, if addiction falls, and if HIV rates drop, why would you not want to do it?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I can see why people would be swayed that way. But I stand on the moral ground of that it's substance abuse, and there's no leeway to be given to it, no matter what those figures show. We have to make that stand.
So you're saying that for your own personal moral convictions, you don't care about the evidence? That sounds a bit like religion to me, Michael.
Well, I tell you something, Christianity used in the right way, Jesus Christ's way, is a good side to religion. Man corrupts things, but that's another topic, perhaps, Maajid. No, I mean, this point made against that we're not winning this battle against drugs. We're not winning the battle against theft and shoplifting. So do we legalise shoplifting and make it easier? You see, it depends where...
You seem to be confusing, fundamentally, you seem to be confusing doing something to harm another person and voluntarily putting an intoxicant into your own body. Can you not see the distinction between me drinking alcohol and stealing somebody else's alcohol?
You lost me there. I'm sorry, Maajid, you lost me on that point.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I'm glad my morals don't stand in the way of evidence.
This is Nigel Farage standing in for Iain Dale, and we are talking about Alexander Coty and El Shafi El Sheikh, the two British-born ISIS fighters that have been captured and from whom the British government have removed their UK citizenship. And I'm pleased about that. And I think we should have stripped everybody that went there, including the 450 that are back on our streets. But it does lead to a slight debate as to where they should go next. And the Americans saying, well, kind of, isn't it your problem, really? Why should it be ours? So should they be tried in Syria? Should they come back to this country to face trial? Should they go to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, or should the Americans take them and put them in Guantanamo? And even though I accept there's a debate on this, I have not backed off an inch from saying I do not want them back in this country. Helen is a new caller from St Albans. Good evening, Helen.
Oh, hi, Nigel. I've got a really good idea. It's quite simple. Basically, if they would like to live by Sharia law, fine, let them die by Sharia law. So basically what we can do, this new Crown Prince of Saudi, he's fighting against ISIS at the moment. Well, guess what? They can go there and be beheaded on a Sunday in the square in the afternoon with everyone to watch, and he can even do pay-per-view, because I will pay to watch that.
No, come on, Helen. Would you really pay to watch that?
Yes, I would. Absolutely, I would, yeah. But why would anyone even consider letting that vermin back in this country? It's ridiculous. And we all know if they come back here, there's a very good chance they'll be found not guilty.
Helen, I don't want them back in this country. I didn't want the other 450. I think Theresa May, as Home Secretary, was hopeless on this, and I don't think anything really has changed until now. And suddenly things have changed. Their citizenship has been revoked, and about time too. So I feel with you on that. But Helen, I wouldn't pay-per-view to see people being executed. I mean, surely isn't that reducing ourselves? Isn't that, Helen, reducing ourselves to their level a bit?
No, I think it's anger, and I think everyone has really had enough of this now. This country has gone so politically far left in every way. We know damn well if they come back to this country, some of the top barristers in the land will represent them. And guess what? Have we got any witnesses? Have we got any statements? We'll probably walk away, and then we'll feed them. We'll give them...
I think in these cases, Helen, I think they're damned actually by their own social media output. But look, Helen, I want to put this to you one last time. It's people like ISIS that conduct public executions and put this stuff out on the internet. If we were to send them to a place where they were publicly beheaded and that was put on the internet, we have lowered ourselves to their level.
Nigel, I think everyone is angry. Everyone is enough of this country, and now the time to actually do something about it.
Okay, I'm losing my line. I'm going to have to lose Helen because of that. Well, Helen feels very strongly about that, so strongly she would pay-per-view to see these people executed. Well, it's not my point of view, but I would guess she's probably not on her own in thinking that.
Heavy tactical teams are on the ground. The shooter still at large. We're told that the FBI...
The students of Stoneman Douglas High School, the youngest among them, only 14, run for their lives, hands in the air, seeking refuge. A boy some of them once sat in class with has returned to the school he was expelled from, armed with a military-style assault weapon. Crouched beneath their desks, they record it in real time.
Boom, 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 boom. I heard a gunshot. I thought it was firecrackers, but after I heard the last shot, I was like, oh, no, I'm out. Oh, my God.
One student's rapid, shallow breathing, a clue to the fear they feel. Inside a classroom, A hellish scene circulated on social media. We can't show you the body lying by the whiteboard or the others the students step over as they run outside. Others are still trapped, hiding in their closets, following their active shooter drill, a drill as much a part of their high school experience as prom or final exams, school shootings in America now so grimly inevitable.
A teacher pulled me in and just locked the door, and I was in a closet with 40 other kids.
The door was locked, thankfully, but he shot quite a few bullets into the glass, and it hit a few people behind me.
Mid the onslaught, the students are texting. Parents arrived desperate for news, held a block away from the school, peering at their phones, looking for a message or a call to say their teenagers are safe.
Okay, we're getting a text direct.
You're getting a text from who?
Her daughter that's inside the classroom. She's telling her that she's about to be evacuated, so
okay, good. Good.
By this time, SWAT teams are swarming the school grounds, surrounding the main building, going classroom to classroom.
Hands, put your hands up. Please. Put your phones away. Exactly.
At the intersection across from the school, paramedics deliver urgent care to the wounded. But there's blessed relief for those who find their daughters and sons safe.
How are you two related?
It's my mom.
Mom, how did you feel to hug your son?
Oh my God, you don't understand. This is what a joy. Oh, it's such a joy and everything. I just hope all the other kids are okay, and oh my God.
Police arrest Nicholas Cruz, who's 19, just outside the school grounds. He'd allegedly used a military-style assault weapon that he'd purchased legally within the last year. He knew the school well, reportedly setting off a fire alarm so teachers opened their doors and sent students toward him, then apparently joining the evacuees to attempt his escape. Police say he'd posted disturbing imagery on social media and was a troubled teenager who'd threatened his peers.
I see him walk around. He was shy, with his lunch bag, but he wouldn't talk a lot. He was that weird kid at school that you see, walk around in school.
Troubled teenagers are a universal constant, but only America gives them easy access to semi-automatic rifles and as much ammunition as they could ever desire. Parkland last year was named the safest city in Florida, a small town well suited to raising a family. But even the youngest were not immune yesterday. Nearby preschools and primary schools briefly on active shooter lockdown too.
We as teachers have to remain calm. They do understand sometimes we have to barricade the door.
Only 2 weeks ago, nursery teacher Tanya Thomas had done active shooter training. Yesterday, she had to put that into practice with her 3-year-olds.
What did you tell them if you were harmed?
If you see Miss Tanya laying on the floor, not talking or able to move, and the door is open for you to escape, don't wait for Miss Tanya. You run outside, you get out, and you stay out.
This is a community in shock, already grieving the victims whose identities are known. The first, the school's assistant football coach and part-time security officer, Aaron Fease, who's said to have thrown himself in front of students to protect them. As the detail of what has happened unfurls, there's not only tears, but a seismic sense of frustration as well.
A child of God is dead. Cannot we acknowledge in this country that we cannot accept this? I can't do it, Wolf. I'm sorry. We can't do it.
Yeah.
Teacher Melissa Falkowski tearfully exhorted America's leaders to take action. She shepherded 19 students into her closet, all of whom survived.
But they knew they knew what to do, we knew what to do. And even still, even with that, we still have 17, casualties, 17 people that aren't going to return to their families. And to me, that's totally unacceptable.
Unacceptable and unforgettable for those who did make it home.
You feel like it's a normal day at school, you don't expect this. And someone could come in and bring a gun and shoot up the school. Until you realize it, you just you start texting your family I love you. Because you never know if you get shot or killed right there and then.
Here to talk with me for a few minutes about this is Ryan Jones from Gun Rights Across America. That's a movement to protect gun rights across the United States, as the name suggests. Ryan, good afternoon to you.
Good morning. Well, from America, anyway.
Yeah, good morning to you. What are your first thoughts when yet another atrocity happens of this nature?
I mean, it's kind of like what mistakes we keep making, and especially our lives of our children. Is like, why are we not protecting them better? I mean, I'm sorry, I've got kids, or not kids. I've had friends that had kids in the school, so I'm kind of thinking about that. But really, it's kind of like a bad nightmare that keeps happening, but it's the same mistakes that I think keep being made with our public school system, and it reflects as our culture as well.
Well, before I go in a bit more detail with you as to what you think those mistakes are, because I know you don't just think it's about guns, you think it's about how people behave around guns, the security that's in place. But you mentioned there that you have friends with children in that school. Do you know that they're okay?
Yes, they are.
Have you spoken to your friends?
I have.
What kind of conversations do you have? I mean, now, obviously, in the heat of it, I suppose the emotion is running very high, but I wonder what conversations you have and have had with those friends about guns, because you think the mistakes made in this instance, obviously a crime has been committed, but the mistakes around that crime are about school security rather than the American right to bear arms.
Absolutely. Well, when Bill Clinton signed the Gun-Free Zone Act back in the 90s, that was the worst thing that could have happened, because it basically denies the ability for anyone to defend the children with any ability or with the weapon that's needed the most to do so. I mean, it's literally basically keeping the as worst. Let me lead with some questions to help you, Ryan, because understandably you're in a bit of shock. Are you saying that rather than legislate against gun ownership, particularly perhaps for people with clear instability, that what you do is you arm schools to the hilt with automatic weapons? I wouldn't say automatic weapons, but I think the proper people with the proper training would definitely have limited the ability for this individual to be able to do what he did. And also the fact that most schools are basically are able for anyone to walk on campus. I mean, most of your public schools, I mean, literally anyone, that has the ability to get on campus can. I mean, any campus, especially in America, we do not have the security of, say, our best private schools that most of our politicians go to, which means basically they have armed security. They have almost, I would say, Fort Knox type of security, but basically they know exactly who's coming onto the property with gated entrances, and also around the clock.
But I'm just struck, and I'll come clean. I disagree with you, but I'm just struck that your answer to this is more guns in more hands.
I think in the right hands. The problem is there's not. I mean, basically, I believe there was one police.
You have an armed police force. You have armed security guards at schools.
And there's millions of people. It's a numbers game. It's simply a numbers game. I mean, you cannot police everyone. You cannot have a police everywhere. That's the basic problem.
But you can police the flow and production of weaponry. If a government can't do that, then it's not worth the word government, is it? If you can't do that.
Well, the government can only do so much. It's in the choice of the people to defend themselves at first. I mean, what the problem is that if you limit the flow amount of people that are able to hit these so-called soft targets or high population areas, it's the same thing with they do any sports arena. They greatly limit or have the highest amount of security. Like they have, they have cameras everywhere. They have bomb-sniffing dogs. They have metal detectors at every entrance. I mean, with the minimal amount of cost it would take to do so, rather than limiting the rights of innocent people. Well, I mean, how hard is that?
Will you be able to look your friends from this school in the eye and tell them you continue to support the right to bear arms?
Absolutely, because they believe the same way we do.
All of them?
Their Second Amendment, yes, ma'am.
What would they want their teenage children armed?
I would assume so. I guarantee you they're teaching their children how to defend themselves.
They're the same supporters as we are of the Second Amendment. The problem is, like I said, they have no control over what the school districts do in their own areas, other than you can't obviously bring firearms here. You can't, except for the law enforcement. That's it. That's how limiting it is. It's the asinine thought to where we ourselves cannot defend ourselves except for certain areas is utterly insane. If someone like this, can buy one rifle and do so much damage, why can we not be able to defend our children the same way? Does that make any sense?
Yes and no. I mean, I get where you're coming from. It's just that what flows from that is problematic for me. Clearly, what's happened is problematic as well. But what flows from what you're suggesting is that you turn schools and children and teachers into a kind of prison environment that they can come and go from as they please. But it's, you're describing an entire nation armed, locked, loaded, and ready.
We already have enough guns for more than most military, ma'am. It's not a hard concept. The difference is that now instead of making our schools and other public venues such easy targets for crazy people that want to do a massive amount of damage to innocent people, we make it security conscious. And that's what most people don't understand. They're so into their own lives, they don't aware how vulnerable they really are.
Let's go into utopia for a moment. If tomorrow you could wake up in a gun-free America, private citizens, no guns, would you go for it?
No, absolutely not.
Why?
Because people still like Nicholas Cruz still exist. It would make me much more vulnerable. Especially
but he'd be a citizen without access to guns, as most of the citizens in the UK are, for example.
And he couldn't do harm to anyone else. I'm sorry, he could have easily set fire to the place if he really wanted.
Yeah, but he wouldn't have a gun and have the capacity. No, I'm not suggesting that you can legislate against his mental problems and emotional problems and violence and cruelty, whatever it turns out to be. But you can legislate against weaponry, and yet you're insisting that even if you could magically wake up tomorrow in a gun-free America, you'd still choose not to.
I prefer having the opportunity to defend myself the most effective weapon possible versus hoping and praying nothing bad ever happens to me.
Okay, Ryan Jones, thank you, from Gun Rights Across America. Really interesting talking to Ryan, because there is no moving Ryan on this, and that's the issue in the United States. I look from the outside in and see a nation that has a mental illness when it comes to the citizenry having so many arms and the powerful weapons they can have. I regard that as an act of total folly. I don't think I could. I don't think I would choose ever to live in America. And if I had a toddler and was thinking about which school to send them to, and the concerns I had were, should I get them a backpack that's got armor plating on the inside? What's the school security system like to the nth degree? What's their attitude? I literally move to the middle of nowhere in preference to living in America with children. We're not even in March, and there have been nearly 20 shootings in schools already. And it's only the ones with big numbers that get the attention. But they happen on an almost weekly basis now in America. If you lived there, would you be Ryan or would you be me? Would you own a gun or would you not?
We know that since Columbine in 1999, there have been 25 fatal active school shooting incidents at elementary and high schools in America. Columbine was April the 20th, 1999, 13 fatalities and more than 20 wounded. Also in 99, Deming High School in New Mexico, Buell Elementary School in Michigan. In the year 2000, Lake Worth Community Middle School, where one was killed in Florida. In 2001, Santana High School in California. In 2001, Red Lion Junior High School. In 2003, Ricori High School in Minnesota. In 2005, Red Lake High School in Minnesota. In 2005, Campbell County Comprehensive High School in Tennessee. In 2006, Essex Elementary School in Vermont. In 2006, Weston High School in Wisconsin. In 2006, West Nickel Mines School in Pennsylvania. In 2011, Millard South High School in Nebraska. In 2012, Chardon High School in Ohio. In 2012, Sandy Creek Elementary School in Connecticut. where 26 elementary school students and others were killed. In 2013, Sparks Middle School in Nevada. In 2013, Arapahoe High School in Arapahoe, Colorado. In 2014, Reynolds High School in Oregon. In 2014, Marysville High School in Washington. In 2016, Independent High School in Arizona. In 2016, Townville Elementary School in North Carolina. In 2017, North Park Elementary School in California. In 2017, Freeman High School in Washington. In 2018, Marshall County High School, just 3 weeks ago in Kentucky. And today, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Broward County, Florida, in the town of Parkland.
We'll come to your calls on the aftermath of the Florida mass murder yesterday. 17 people lost their lives. What needs to happen now? Because we have these conversations whenever there is this kind of mass shooting in America, and it's kind of Groundhog Day, isn't it? We did it after Sandy Hook. We've done it after so many of them. And people say, well, why are you obsessed with America? Why do you keep talking about these shootings in America? Well, because frankly, they don't really happen in any other countries, do they? Or certainly not to the extent that they do in America. What is the reason for that? To me, it's quite simple. It is about the lax gun laws there, and they need to be reformed. We can respect the right of Americans to bear arms, but surely the availability of guns has to be more restricted than it is now. 0345 6060 973. Well, let's talk to John R. Lott Jr., author of The War on Guns, More Guns, Less Crime, and president of the Crime Prevention Research Centre. John, very good evening to you.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Now, the 18 incidents so far involving guns in schools so far this year, not a single one in the European Union. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, that's not true.
Well, I've got the list in front of me here.
Yeah, well, I've seen the list too. I mean, if you go through the list, first of all, not all those gunshots were on school property. It's everything from kindergarten through college. But you include things like a police officer's gun accidentally firing. You include things like, a 31-year-old man who, after school's over, pulls his car into the parking lot, somebody who's completely unrelated to school, and kills himself while he's in the parking lot there. Do you really want to include things like that? Is that what people think of when they're talking about school shootings?
Fine.
You're talking about a pellet gun being fired on school property.
All right, take 4 off. There's still 14 and not a single one in the European Union.
No. Look, if you take cases where the gun was fired on school property and, somebody was hit and so it wasn't an accident and it wasn't a suicide with somebody just by themselves, you're down to 4 cases.
No, you're not. I've got them.
Yes.
I'm not going to go through all 18 with you, but all right, take it. Let's meet in the middle. Let's say there are 10 cases that we can say involve guns that shouldn't have been there, and they involve guns going off, involve some people dying as well. Let's say there are just 10 cases. Why were there 10 cases in America, not a single one in the European Union?
Well, I mean, you can make up any number you want to say.
I'm not making up any number.
Well, it's not 10. Well, look, first of all, if you look at, I mean, you've had mass public shootings in schools in Europe, from Finland to Germany. If you look at the ones which are the worst ones, Germany has 2 of the 4 worst ones between the Europe and the United States. Finland has had a couple big mass public shootings at schools. You have to kind of adjust for the fact that a country like Finland only has 4 million people in it. If you look at Europe as a whole, you have as many mass public shootings as the United States.
That's a complete lie. Why do you come on radio and tell a lie? That is a complete and utter lie.
People can go to our website. It's the first post that we have there to go and look at mass public shootings around the world. Take France. In 1 year, in 2015,
I'm talking
they had
about
more
schools.
casualties.
I'm talking about schools, Mr. Lott.
Okay, well, I'm talking about mass public shootings in
well,
general.
I'm not. I'm talking about schools, and there hasn't been a single one this year in the European Union. There have been, you can call it 4, 10, 18, whatever, in your country. Do you not accept that this man who had got this assault rifle should not have been allowed to get it?
Sure, it'd be nice to stop somebody in advance from doing it. But, here's the question. What law do you want to have in order to do that? So the types
how about the kind of law that we have in this country, that when we had a mass shooting in a school in 1994, we took the responsible act and we restricted gun ownership, and we haven't had a single incident since then, and that is entirely because of these laws.
How many did you have before that?
What's that got to do with anything?
Well, the point
there hasn't been one in 23 years.
You go for decades before in the UK when you didn't have those restrictions and you didn't have it either.
And you aren't concerned at all by the number of these incidents that there are in your country. Sandy Hook, 26 people died.
And something needs to be done.
And what would that be?
Something needs to be done.
What would that be?
The one common feature for all these is that they keep on occurring where guns are banned, where people aren't allowed to go and defend themselves.
Excuse me?
These killers, time after time.
So you would have school children having guns to shoot the guys that come in, would you?
No, I mean, I guess you jump to illogical conclusions on these things.
Well,
the point is, you can have it so that you have staff or teachers or parents who are there who can go and carry concealed handguns.
You have to be kidding me. You want teachers to carry guns? What kind of country do you want the United States to turn into?
Look, you have terrorist attacks in Europe, right? You have terrorist attacks all over the world. The United States is terrorist attacks in general. These types of terrorist attacks, we're about equal to our population share of the world in terms of these attacks that we get. And so the question is, what do you do to stop them? What you find is that these killers purposely try to find places where they know victims can't defend themselves. These guys may be crazy in some sense, but they're not stupid.
But if they didn't have the gun in the first place, they couldn't carry out the act. What part of that do you not understand?
Well, look, Germany has extremely strict gun control.
I'm not talking about Germany. I'm talking about the United States.
School shootings, despite the strict gun control laws that you have there. In France, you can't even own a semi-automatic rifle, and yet the types of attacks that they've been having there involve machine guns.
Well, I repeat, we're talking about your country. Whatever. I don't know what laws there are.
The point is, even where you have the strict gun control, you have high rates of mass public shooting casualties and deaths from these things. The United States isn't unique.
Well, it is unique. If you look at the number of deaths as a result of guns, not just in schools, but in the country more generally, it is a zillion times more than it is in Britain, France, or Germany, and there has to be a reason for that.
Because we have a drug gang problem. Over half the murders in the United States take place in 2% of the counties. And if you were to look at a murder map for those 2% of the counties, you're going to find it's basically about 8 to 10 blocks in each of those counties where the vast majority of their murders occur.
So
basically you have drug gangs fighting against each other in order to control drug turf. So we have a bad drug gang problem.
You genuinely believe that the gun laws or the lack of gun control laws in the United States has no role to play in these kind of mass shootings?
I think they do have a role. I think the types of restrictions that we have. Let's finish one thought before we get into other thoughts for a second here. So you take the drug gang problem that's there. How much effort do you think our government spent in order to try to keep illegal drugs from coming into the country? Huge amounts. The same groups that go and sell illegal drugs in the United States are the same groups that sell illegal guns. If I could click my fingers tomorrow and cause all illegal drugs to disappear and all guns, How long do you think it would be before illegal drugs started coming back into the U.S.? 20 minutes if you're in El Paso?
It's a deflecting tactic because there's
How's it deflecting?
Because in these school shootings, I don't recall any of the people that carry out these shootings were under the influence of drugs or part of drug gangs.
No, but you're the one who went off of this in order to talk about murders generally, and I'm trying to answer that question. Now, if you want to go back when you're losing the argument, that's
I'm not
fine.
losing any argument. I'll let
let's finish one argument.
I'll tell you what. I'll let my listeners judge who's losing the argument here, because I suspect that 90% of them will actually think that it is almost criminal to come on the radio and say that gun control plays no part in these shootings.
Here's the point about the drug gang stuff, and then we can go and talk back about the school shootings if you want. The point is that these drug gangs are going to be able to bring in the weapons that they need to protect their valuable property just as much as easily as they can bring in the illegal drugs.
You say bring in the guns. The guns are already there. They're not having to import them, are they?
I'm saying even if you banned the guns, even if you could, my example was you click your fingers and all guns disappear and all illegal drugs. You would be bringing them back into the country. You go to Mexico. Mexico has one gun store in the entire country. The only guns you can buy there are 22 caliber and below, so very small guns. That's not what the drug gangs use. Mexico has a homicide rate that's 4 to 5 times higher than the homicide rate in the United States.
And your point is? I mean, I can't believe that you can't see.
So if you want to talk about overall murder rates...
Well, I don't particularly. We were here to talk about school shootings, and you for understandable... No.
We could switch back to schools. You're the one who said, let's talk about overall murders.
I don't think we're going to get very far with this conversation, are we? I think we'll end it here. John Lott, thank you very much for joining us. Somebody says here, David says, this interview shows exactly why the US is in the state it is with gun control. It is quite incredible, the attitudes that you hear from people like John Lott. I remember the last time we covered this subject, I can't remember who I was talking to, but it's just, there is never going to be a meeting of minds, is there? And that is why successive American politicians just, I don't think they think that they can do anything, so they've just given up almost. Donald Trump, I suspect in the back of Donald Trump's mind, he knows what needs to happen here, but he knows that he'll never get it through Congress. So he thinks, well, what's the point in trying? Barack Obama tried and completely failed.
Today, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, a man who has as much control as anyone over what Congress can actually do on any given matter of public interest, spoke about yesterday's school shooting, about the murder of 17 students and teachers.
Right now, I just think we need to take a breath and collect the facts. This is not the time to jump to some conclusion, not knowing the full facts. So I just think what you don't do is knee-jerk and say, let's just take away a citizen's rights.
If that sounds familiar, it is because it is. Listen, for instance, to what Paul Ryan said after the shooting in San Bernardino that left 14 dead.
What we're trying to do is find out the facts and make sure that what our response is actually addresses the problems without infringing upon the rights of law-abiding citizens. We want to make sure that we don't violate a person's rights if they're a law-abiding citizen. You have to think these things through before we just have knee-jerk reactions. That's my point.
And then listen to what Paul Ryan said after the shooting in Oregon that left 9 people dead.
Ryan says now is not the time for, quote, knee-jerk reactions to the Second Amendment.
I think by going after citizens' Second Amendment rights after these tragedies is to overlook the real problems that underlie these, particularly in the area of mental illness.
Yes, mental illness. You'll see a lot of Republicans talking about mental illness, and they might have a point, although the data doesn't quite bear it out. But it might be a little more persuasive if Congress was doing anything about that issue. In fact, literally the only gun-related bill to be signed by this Republican president with a Republican Congress was a bill last year that rolled back an Obama-era regulation that actually make it easier for a person deemed to have a mental disability to purchase a gun. So while Paul Ryan avoids a knee-jerk reaction to yet another mass shooting, we move forward towards the next one without any reaction at all.
Richard's called from Blythe in Northumberland. Oh, one of my favourite parts of the world. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Sheila. Yeah, I've got two daughters, like twins, and they're Catholics, obviously, because we're Catholics, Erin and Rosaline. Basically, we went mad because obviously at school they were asking for money off of parents to go on a trip to a Sikh temple, and obviously we were against that. But my daughter's also been doing stuff out the what called it, I can't remember what it's called, the Quran or whatever. Do you know what I mean? The Quranic book, what it's called. Yeah. And I thought, well, you're not Muslim, you shouldn't be doing that. So I put the homework in the bin. And I said, I'm sorry, but you know, when a few families have rang the school, I'm not mentioning the school, so don't worry. But a few of the families actually phoned them and said, this is a Catholic school where she should be learning about other religions.
That's nonsense, Richard, though. You don't think that, do you? You think they shouldn't learn about other religions?
Absolutely not.
Why?
They're Catholics. That's what, because why should they?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Church every Sunday.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because they don't live in an exclusively Catholic world, and you are cutting off their noses to spite your face.
Well, no, because we don't want the daughters to learn about other religions.
Why? Why do you want to keep them ignorant of what's actually in the world?
Because that's the... Sorry, say that again?
Why do you want to keep them ignorant of something that's actually in the world?
Well, it's not. We do realise that there are other religions around the world. You've got Sikhism, Judaism, Hinduism, all the other ones, but then that's not what they're about. They are Catholics, and that's it, in our eyes anyway. And I think if they want to look it up later on as they get older, that's fine, but they're only 12-year-old, you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? So, to me, it's important for them to get a good grounding in the Catholic religion, you know what I mean? So we don't like the idea of them learning about other religions because it's not what... Because you don't get that doesn't happen in Muslim schools. They don't learn about Catholicism. It's all about Muhammad and the Prophet, whatever he's called, you know?
Well, I don't know whether that's true in every Muslim school. I don't know whether that's the case. But Richard, what was the reaction of the teachers and, more importantly, your daughters when you threw their homework in the bin?
They weren't happy, but obviously they couldn't do anything about it because my partner said no. We don't want them learning about Muslim religion. It's not what we're about. We're Catholics, and that's what.
What about Judaism?
Well,
because of course Jesus was a Jew. Of course, Jesus wasn't a Catholic; he was a Jew.
They were like looking it up, you know, about the Prophet Muhammad, and I thought, what's that? I said, get that out of here in the bin straight away, and that's what we've done. Do you know what I mean?
Richard, I think you're really being counterproductive for your daughter's education there, if you don't mind my saying.
Oh, well, I don't mind.
I say that as a girl who went to school with nuns, taught by nuns, loved it.
They've been stayed away from their own religions. Do you not think?
Well, have you heard what the Pope has said over the years about other people's religions and how important he thinks it is that we know one another and respect one another? We had a look at what Pope Francis has said about it.
I mean, they're only young girls, only 12-year-olds, you know.
Well, that's what education's all about. You start young. That's why you start young, Richard. I think your attitude is rather old-fashioned, if you don't mind my saying. And I think Pope Francis would agree, if I can speak for the Pope on this occasion. Thank you.
Nigel wants to speak to us from Nuneaton. Go for it, Nigel.
Hello, how are you? You all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. Tell us what you think.
Well, you're going on about Farage and all this lot coming into the country, but how do you feel about this hello meat that the Muslims do?
How do I feel what about it?
Well, how do you feel about, you know, I would say Farage is not as cruel as when they slaughter hello meat. I think I've said it wrong again.
Halal.
Yeah. How do you feel about? Is that cruelty of just not stunning the animal and just cutting its throat?
Well, so let's start with this. If you're asking my opinion on whether animals should be killed before being stunned, absolutely not. They should be stunned before they're killed.
Yeah.
If you're asking wait, Nigel. If you're asking what halal meat is...
Yeah, I'm eating it myself.
Well, no, if you're... hold on. If you're asking what halal meat is, then... that's actually a disputed fact, even within Muslim theology. If you're telling me that halal meat is necessarily the slaughtering of animals before they're stunned, I'm going to disagree with you.
So, you're quite happy with it then?
Eh? Did you?
You're happy?
Let me start again. I don't think any animal should be killed unless it's stunned first, if we are going to eat meat, right?
Yeah.
However, second point, there's a huge dispute within Muslim theology as to what halal actually is and what its conditions are. third point, if you're going to call up and insist that halal meat is necessarily the killing of animals before they're stunned, then you and I are going to have a debate about that, because that's not true.
Well, I'm against, really, having all animals should be...
Yeah, so, mate, let's do this. Let's take the word halal out of it and say you and I are both against the killing of animals before they're stunned. But if you want to add the word halal into it and make it a Muslim debate, what you're going to need to educate yourself about is that within Muslim communities, there's a debate as to what the definition of halal is in the first place. And there's a whole bunch of Muslims who believe that halal has to be ethically reared animals that are organically raised, that are stunned before they're slaughtered and have to be treated ethically, because for them, that's what halal means. There's a dispute within the religion as to the definition of halal. What you've done is you've taken one particular image of what halal meat is to you, probably from the videos that you've seen on YouTube, that great source of that great encyclopedia of knowledge, and you've decided this must be halal meat, the worst possible case scenario for that. But actually, all halal meat imported from New Zealand, for example, is stunned before slaughter. That's one example for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'm not well up on the Muslim area of that religion and that, but all animals should be stunned before having their throats cut.
Well, we've agreed. We've agreed on that, Nigel.
It's really penny, really, because it's only force fed. It ain't like it's been absolutely, killed before it's been stunned.
Well, so hang on. No, it's torture, isn't it? To force feed, just as bad as bad to kill it.
In a way, yes, it is torture.
Yeah.
But no more than the cattle get more torture than the duck does.
Well, we're not going to do whataboutery, because we've agreed on that stuff already, on the slaughter stuff. We just dealt with that. Now can we deal with the foie gras?
It is a cruel way of doing it, and I've seen it on the TV,
right.
what they do to
So
it.
would you eat it, Nigel? Would you eat foie gras?
I suppose now I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I wouldn't now.
Well, I'd hope that you'd be as clear on that as you are on your animals killed without stunning. I mean, at the end of the day, both are cruel. And if you've called in to have a go at halal meat without really knowing what it is, then I suggest you take a firm view on the foie gras, which is as unethical. Roy from Southport, go for it.
Hi, I think a ban on foie gras is a great thing, but I used to love meat. But as I became more and more aware of the way animals are produced in farms, I decided to go vegetarian and eventually vegan. And I think most people, Maajid, if they saw what animals go through, I think they'd begin to question about their own lifestyle choices.
Well, I think certainly most people should question as to whether the entire world going vegan is a sustainable model. The jury's out on that, I'm afraid, for me. But certainly, I don't think that I have the moral high ground on this whatsoever. No. I'm a red meat eater, and I don't think I have the moral high ground at all.
I think I don't think the world's going to go vegetarian tomorrow or even vegan, but I think more and more people are questioning it. And I think it's a good thing for people to question their habits and what they do in their lives generally.
So, Roy, quick fire questions. Remain in the EU or ban foie gras? Because you can't have both.
Oh, that's a big one. Because
that's the topic for the hour. That's exactly how Michael Gove is aiming to outflank Labour. He's laid the gauntlet down. He said, "You guys want to ban foie gras, but you haven't come down firmly, officially as the Labour Party to support hard Brexit." So Michael Gove said the only way, and he's right, by the way, the only way we can in this country currently ban foie gras is if we exempt ourselves from the single market.
Yeah, I think I'm generally pro-Brexit, but I really am up in my mind about that. It's not a core thing for me. But animal cruelty is, and I would err on the side of protecting animals. But I think really the legislative aspects of this are neither here nor there. Every person listening out there can ask themselves, what can they do to make the world a kinder place? And it all begins with ourselves when we choose what to eat. Yeah.
All right, Roy, that's a really sensible note to leave on for the moment. But anyway, this kind of religion in public life does often, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Catholics, whether it's anyone really of a conservative social bent, they often tend to be, to my eyes, on the wrong side of this stuff. But how much should religion affect our public policy? 0345 60 60 973. I think we can take a call straight off the bat here. Toby from Didcot, tell us what you think.
Hi, Maajid. So first of all, and I think it will be a nice segue into the abortion side of things. So I think our organs, the public's organs, should not belong to the state, so they shouldn't automatically be given to the state as such. So that's just a short point on that.
No, let's make it a medium point. Why not?
Okay. And then I'm thinking, so in many cases, when you do get a new organ, it can prolong your life. However, abortion cuts short someone's life.
No, but why do you oppose the presumption of an opt-in for your organs for when you die? Why do you oppose that?
Because I don't think it should be presumed that anyone's organs belongs to the state.
No, the thing is, the state doesn't own them. The state is simply managing the process of who they then go to, who's in need. And if you disagree with that, you can opt out and fine. That's your right. It's anyone's right to be stingy in that way.
Yeah, though, when you have to do any kind of paperwork and box ticking, it's actually very easy to forget. And then it could get pretty traumatic for the people that have to pick up the pieces, because if you want organs, they have to be fresh.
My friend, Toby, no matter how traumatic it may be for my family to see my dead body and try and resist my organs going to help somebody, I can assure you it's far more traumatic for a family member to watch a living person die because I've been stingy and have decided that when I'm dead and I don't need my organs and they're going to rot in the ground anyway, that I don't want that person to have their life.
I understand that point. So moving on from that, perhaps to the question of protesting against abortions, I think it is interesting that is the thing that causes the most anxiety, because if you protested about any other, say, operation or medical intervention, and no one really does that. But I think it is because here you're talking about not so much doing something to yourself only, but you're actually doing it to another person.
Well, that's the entire debate, Toby, as to whether it is a person at that stage or not, and that is going to be the debate we have for the rest of the hour. So thank you for calling in, Toby from Didcot. Catholic bishops are opposing changes to the law that aim to set up protest-free buffer zones outside abortion clinics. They also oppose the presumption that all of our organs will be donated unless we opt out. How much should religion affect our public policy? Michael from Belfast, tell us what you think.
Hey, Maajid. It's good to be back in the show again.
Oh, pleasure.
Maajid, I just think it's a wee bit strange that you talked in the last hour about the cruelty to animals, but you haven't once mentioned yet about the cruelty involved in the abortion procedure itself.
Well, yeah, sorry. Your assumption in that question is that the fetus is a baby, is a human being, and that's the very subject of debate here, isn't it? No one's disputing the duck is a duck when we were talking about the cruelty of force-feeding it to produce foie gras.
But is the baby still not...
Your conversation is akin to saying, is the egg to be considered a chicken? That's what you're talking to me about. No one's disputing a chicken is a chicken. What we're talking about is an egg a chicken?
Well, I believe it's life, and I believe it's a sentient...
well, I'm quite sure you do, but you can't make me believe it's life, can you?
And I believe that experiences pain. If you go online, you can watch a movie called Silent Scream, which shows you ultrascan images of a baby recording from the very brutal procedure that
okay, so we can have this conversation, but can we first concede that your opening analogy was a false equivalence?
Well, I don't think it is.
You don't think it is? So you think eggs and chicken are the same thing?
Well, a baby's a baby. It's not an egg.
No. A fetus, like an egg, before it grows into a chick, your position is essentially asserting that an egg and a chick are the same thing. And I'm suggesting to you that there's a difference. Whether or not you think the egg has some form of life is different. But you cannot, I'm suggesting to you, assert that an egg and a baby chick are the same thing.
Well, there's evidence to show that the baby, or as you want to call it, an egg, experiences pain.
Well,
and you were talking
but it's not the same as a chick, is it? We'll go there, Michael. We'll go there in a minute. Hold on. We'll go there in a minute. First, do you think an egg and a chick are the same thing? We'll go to whether a fetus experiences pain in a second. For the moment, I'm just trying to understand your position. Do you think an egg and a chick are the same thing?
I don't see the equivalence, and I don't see how you can bring that equivalence in.
Well, because you started by saying it's ironic how I'm against animal cruelty, and yet I support the woman's right to choose in abortion. And so I'm pushing you on this because for me it's not ironic. It's very clear. I do not equate between a duck egg and an actual duck. And what I was opposing was force feeding ducks, which is very different to eating a duck egg. And so, though, of course, you may also take a moral principled stance against eating duck eggs too, and you would be very consistent in doing so. But they are different things. And so I'll ask you one last time. Do you think an egg and a chick are the same thing?
Do you think that regardless of... do you think that an animal and a baby or a fetus or an egg or whatever you want to call it, if it experiences pain, should we not debate that? Should that not be a moral...
Why are you straw-manning me? I haven't even said we shouldn't debate it. I'm trying to get there, but to get there, I first need to address the thing you raised when you first called in, by saying it's ironic that Maajid believes in being against animal cruelty while he supports the woman's right to abort her fetus if she chooses within the confines of the law. And so I'm pushing you on that first point first, because you started that conversation, so I'm trying to understand your perspective on it. We will get to whether you believe fetuses feel pain if you can just simply answer that question first. But is there in your mind an exact equivalence between an egg and a chick?
Well, I would answer the question if I could see the equivalence, but I don't see the equivalence. So
there isn't an equivalence then, is there? So then why did you begin as if there was? So there's no contradiction between somebody being against animal cruelty while also supporting a woman's right to choose, so long as there's no equivalence between an egg and a chick. Agree or not, Michael?
I don't see the equivalent, so I can't answer that question. I can't see how you can bring it.
Right, so you can see there's no... therefore, I can perfectly well, within my consistent stance, be against animal cruelty while supporting a woman's right to choose, yes?
I think it's wrong and it's cruel.
I didn't say you think it's right. I'm addressing your first point first, Michael. Is it consistent for me to oppose animal cruelty while also supporting women's rights to choose?
I think it's torturous and cruel what goes on with the production of
right, you're going to keep it on my question. We're going to move on. Emily says, I'm screaming at the radio. Eggs that we eat aren't fertilised. Therefore, they don't have the potential to be anything more than an egg! !3. The word egg cannot be used in the same sentence as fetus, baby, chick, etc. Yes, Emily, I think the point I was trying to make to that chap was that his argument rests on a presumption as to when life begins. And that's the point, that it's not so simple. And is it... when does life begin? Is it production? Is it at ovulation? No. Is it at fertilization? Many, including me, would argue no. Is it a slightly later date than that? And that's the conversation, and they're not the same thing. There are moral grey areas between a live human being and a fetus. And I think actually the point really is that he was arguing that to be against animal cruelty while supporting a woman's right to choose is an inconsistency. And no, it's not, because we're talking of torturing a duck or a goose, which is a known duck or a goose, and it's not disputed it's a duck or a goose. Yet here we're disputing whether the fetus is indeed alive yet or not. Stephen from Bradford, tell us what you think.
Well, I agree with you, I think, although you're trying to be non-committal on a personal note. What's it got to do with Catholic bishops anyway?
Yeah.
Or any other kind of religious leaders?
Well, no, I'm not. No, non-committal. I am entirely, by the way, Stephen. Stephen, I'm 100%. I'm 100% on the side of women's right to choose. Stephen, stop a minute. Stephen, can you hear me?
And choosing the bit best. It's none of their damn business.
Are we listening to a pre-recorded message? Stephen?
Yeah.
What do you think I'm being non-committal on?
I think you're being non-committal as to whether we ought to be listening to, whether we ought to A, be listening to, and B, allowing these so-called religious leaders, Catholic bishops and the like, to have any say whatsoever. It's none of their business.
Well, no, they certainly have a right to speak.
Dealing with little boys' private parts and
Stephen, we live in a democracy. They have a right to speak. I don't think we have to listen to them. All right, Stephen. Look, they have a right to speak. We don't have to listen to them. There's no non-committal there. It's actually it's a commitment to the same thing, which is a woman has the right to choose, and a Catholic bishop has the right to, or a priest has the right to oppose it. But you know, we don't have to listen to them, and that's what we're talking of. John from Norwood, tell us what you think.
Oh, hi, Maajid. Thanks for letting me onto your show.
That's all right.
I think there's a little bit of a contradiction in what you say, to the extent that if women have the right to choose, which you heavily support, then what about people's right to, I mean, and this is a positive actual choice, isn't it? What about people's right to positively, actively choose what happens to their body parts? Why are the two different? They're both parts of the body. They're both inert. Why shouldn't choice affect both?
I'll tell you why, John. It's quite simple. Though, of course, you do have a right to choose to be stingy and keep your own body organs.
Stingy is a bit of a rough word.
Well,
you might have a lot of reasons for it.
Well, what reasons, John?
Well, I don't know.
So let me tell you something. In North Korea, where human beings are being harvested for organs in an incredibly brutal and cruel regime, the misery that is caused.
Solidarity with the third world.
Eh? What?
You got to give your organs to the state in solidarity for the third world.
No, John. Hold on. I'm talking of human suffering, and the fact that you've just immediately decided to belittle that as some form of campaign against foreigners. I'm astounded. You know, the fact is, human beings are harvested for their organs on a black market because there's a demand in the West for organs, and for you to turn that into, oh, it's about the third world, I don't really want to talk about it because I don't care, is frankly incredibly cruel. Because it's we in the West who can afford to pay for those organs that are being harvested on a black market in developing countries. Therefore, we bear a level of responsibility on the suffering that is inflicted upon unsuspecting innocent kidnap victims whose organs are harvested because of the demand in the West to buy those organs. For you to dismiss that is incredibly callous, John.
You can enjoy it. You can abandon someone's choice about what happens to their organs, but apply it when it suits you politically.
No, John, you're not understanding the point. You can opt out of. Hold on. You can opt out. You can opt out of this presumption that your organs will be donated, so you still have the choice ultimately, but ultimately why your presumption should be that you are opting in unless you specify it is because, unlike in an abortion, no one else suffers as a result of this. Whereas with the organ situation, human beings are suffering, whether it's the poor chap that needs the organ transplant, or indeed it's the person that's been kidnapped on the black market to have their organ harvested. Real human suffering's involved. That's the fundamental difference between abortion and the organ debate. No other third party suffers when a woman chooses to have an abortion, John.
Except the baby.
Well, that's if you believe it is a baby.
Well, listen, if people believe that a killing is about to happen and they feel morally bound to object to it, who are you to say they mustn't?
I'm not saying they mustn't.
Yes, you are.
No, you
want to limit.
No, I'm not, John. No, I'm not. I'm saying, of course, they can speak out against it, just not right in front of the door of the clinic where the woman's trying to pass.
Why shouldn't they bring the attention of the act about to be taken in their mind to the person who's about to take it?
Well, I'm sure, John, John, if you go down the road and protest, you can have every right to speak about it, but like outside of Parliament, should it be legal to protest outside the House of Commons?
Well, you know, protesting outside the House of Commons is an art, that's a canard, that's an Aunt Sally. You know, I mean, you can't protest in a lot of places. You can't protest outside Aldermaston. You can't protest... and it depends what you say anyway. There's a lot of places you can't protest.
So there we are. So it's not so black and white, is it, John?
Well, the House of Commons has got nothing to do with it.
No, it has. It's not allowed to protest outside the House of Commons, and I'm saying that...
So what?
Right, so John...
They don't kill babies in the House of Commons.
They don't kill babies in the House of Commons.
No, they don't.
Some would disagree with you there, John, when they make decisions to go to war, but that's another debate altogether. I mean, can you not see, therefore, the entire subjectivity of this debate? You know, because you believe it's about killing babies. Others believe that when the millions of children died in Iraq due to depleted uranium, and Madeleine Albright was asked as to whether the price was worth it on CBS 60 Minutes by Leslie Stahl, and she said yes. Others would believe that's killing babies. 1 million children in Iraq. And so, you know what, based upon my subjective definition of what killing a baby is, I'm going to now start breaking the law and protesting outside the House of Commons where it's not allowed to protest because it's an obstruction. The fact is that when a vulnerable woman is going to an abortion clinic, the last thing she wants to see at the door of the clinic is people shouting at her baby killer, because you clearly believe it's killing, isn't it?
No,
don't you, John?
I don't believe that. I never said that. You're putting words in my mouth.
What do you believe? Do you believe abortion?
Well, I believe in the rights of individuals to express their opinions.
No, John. Do you believe aborting a fetus is killing a baby?
I believe those who believe it is have a right to voice their opinion.
And John, what do you believe? I'll ask you a third time. Do you believe aborting a fetus is killing a baby?
I do not have... I am a secular person, right? But I have great increasing understanding of the Catholic doctrine.
Do you believe aborting a fetus is killing a baby?
The slaughtering of the next generation of the proletariat is a crime.
What?
Yes.
What?
How many people have been murdered for abortion since the 60s?
So, John, do you just answer the blooming question, mate? Do you believe an abortion is killing a baby?
Well, I believe that not having babies and getting rid of them and then bringing in cheap labour is a good answer, isn't it?
So you're anti-immigration and you believe abortion is killing babies. Can we get a straight answer out of you for once?
Birth to a proletariat and you can bring it into the country on the cheap. Great.
John, why are you embarrassed of your own opinion? You've called onto a national radio show to debate me on the subject of abortion. Why are you hiding what your opinion is? Why are you embarrassed? Be proud of your view. What do you think abortion is? Is it killing babies?
Well, I'm just saying...
Well, there's not much you're saying. I've asked you the blooming question about 5 times. It's you're clearly passionate about it. You're clearly upset. You believe there's some form of conspiracy to kill the proletariat and bring in immigrants. Why, for the life of me, can't you just simply tell me what you think? What do you believe, John? Do you believe abortion is killing babies?
I mean, I've told you quite a lot about what I think, but I'm in favour, above all, of the right of self-expression.
Is abortion killing babies, John? Can you answer that?
Well, well, what do you think it is?
No, I'm asking you what you think it is, John.
It's the termination of
John,
life.
I don't think it is.
Oh, yes, it is killing.
Oh,
yes.
Finally, we got an answer. Wow.
Well, it's the termination of life.
No, right. Why did it take you so... Oh, my God. It's not, I wasn't trying to trap you. It's a simple question that I was trying to ask you, and you're just embarrassed. You're clearly embarrassed, and you know why it took you so long, and now we've got overtime again? Because you're embarrassed of your own position. That's the only reason that somebody would hide and conceal their own answer like that for so long, and it's like trying to it's like trying to squeeze water out of a stone or blood out of a rock. It's because you're embarrassed of your own position, because you know it sounds absurd. And that's why it took you so long to answer it. Thank you, finally, for answering the question, John.
I know he's a moron.